Welcome to Dynamic Leadership Center. Today, I'm talking about the importance of having a vision for your organization. When we talk about high performance in organizations, we often focus on strategy, execution, and results. But beneath all of that, the foundation for success is culture. And culture, more than anything else, is shaped by vision. Culture isn't just an abstract concept. It's the environment in which people work. Think about this. Just as a human's internal environment is the external environment for their selves, an organization's internal culture is the external environment for its employees. In the same way that unhealthy habits can lead to toxicity within the body, an organization can develop patterns of behavior that create a toxic work environment. And just like people who stay in toxic relationships for far longer than they should, employees often stay in toxic workplaces even when they know it's not serving them. That hurts both the employees and the organization. I often hear leaders say, "I can't do much about culture." At the same time, many of us recognize that culture eats strategy for lunch, as the saying goes. So where does that leave us? I am promoting dynamic leadership for small business owners and leaders, people who are still actively building their leadership teams and shaping their organizations to grow and scale. As a small business owner, you are in a position to design, foster, and reinforce a culture that serves your vision. You have an opportunity to be intentional rather than reactive. Either way, a culture will evolve, and culture, like belief systems, will override willpower and intention. The right culture enables teams to achieve results beyond what seems possible. Without it, no strategy, no matter how well crafted, will succeed long term. A great example of how culture influences performance is the comfort zone. Organizations, like individuals, tend to settle into habits and familiar ways of operating. Over time, these patterns become ingrained, and breaking out of them can seem impossible, similar to how humans have challenges breaking habits. Why? Because beliefs, values, and attitudes reinforce the comfort zone as the safe and familiar place to be, even when it's holding the organization back, and people know that it's holding the organization back. So how do we move beyond that? The answer starts with vision. Just as individuals need purpose to become the best version of themselves, organizations need a compelling vision to unite people towards something bigger than any one individual. A shared vision creates alignment. It clarifies roles. It reduces friction. When everyone knows the goal, people don't get caught up in politics or unnecessary interpersonal conflict. There's no hiding behind smoke and mirrors. Results provide the real clues. I advocate that we need a mix of operational excellence and project excellence to move toward our vision. Progress isn't linear. The journey is full of pivots. Much like an airplane adjusting course throughout a flight, the key is making continuous corrections while staying focused on the destination. And here's an important distinction. If high performance is the goal, then the organization must function as a team, not as a family, not as a hierarchy of command and control, not as a political system. Teams operate with clarity. They practice with purpose, and they execute with precision. Now, unlike sports teams that prepare for a game every week, organizations don't always know when the big moment will come. The crisis that presents an opportunity for massive growth could arrive unexpectedly, and usually does. The organizations that are prepared will seize those moments and can gain a lasting competitive advantage. Another important fact in business, we aren't playing against an opponent who's trying to stop us on every move. Our only real competition is who we were yesterday. Of course, there's competitors out there that we compete against, but they don't have a playbook that's designed to stop our plays. They're focused on their own offense. The goal is not to beat anyone. It's to constantly elevate our own performance, and we do that by following proven principles and best practices toward a common vision. By understanding the power of vision, aligning culture, and committing to a team-based approach, small business owners and leaders can build organizations that will thrive. I'll be running a series over the next several weeks around the building blocks for dynamic leadership, including the development plans and the project excellence, as I mentioned. But this will go on for several weeks, so you'll understand how dynamic leadership can look in your organization, and you'll be able to follow along with it and start implementing parts and pieces, because it can be done that way based on your own schedule and your own needs. So first, today, I'll illustrate what I mean when I talk about breaking out of the comfort zone and why we need project excellence as well as operational excellence. So let's dive into that. All right, what we're talking about now is what I mentioned, the comfort zone. And life, as you look around, it's very, very fractal. We have clues from so many different things, and it's interesting that our cells respond to threats very much the way we as humans respond to threats. So we can learn from looking at these things. That's what I meant when I said that the internal environment is the external environment of ourselves. And most people would agree that if you walk around, even though it's not directly physiologically health directed, but it's mental health related or cognitive related, we can have so much anxiety and stress that we create illness within our bodies. And that's the same way that I'm talking about with respect to organizations. We're all familiar with the comfort zone, and I think most people would agree that we run 95% of our lives is by habit, and we're just living in this comfort zone as we go along, which is in that comfort zone. And in an organization, that can happen on the bottom side, and I'll just give this as an example, but there's so many examples you can come up with. On the bottom level, or barrier, if you will, is that there have been fines or penalties or threats of retribution. You get the idea. So there are things that have happened that cause people not to drop below this. Cities, states, they use the penalties to keep people in line. Sometimes it gets abused. I'll just leave it at that. Sometimes this ability to drive organizational behavior, when the organizations are over there, it can be abused. And I would argue that sometimes even within the organization, especially if it gets political, this can be abused because we have silos. Depending on how much command and control and how much politics are involved, these silos may not talk to each other. And everything has to go all the way up, and then the leaders talk to each other and they fight it out or not. And the people across here, the ones who get creative, they figure out ways to interact with that other silo, but a lot of them just have to suck it up. And so, that's that threat of retribution, or it could be politics. It could be maybe somebody wants to get promoted, and in order to get promoted, they need the alignment or support of a particular person, and maybe that person is not aligned with their values. So you can get my point about what sets up that lower limit. When we go above the upper limit, we get into the unfamiliar, we get into uncharted territory, and we get a little bit nervous up there. It's a threat. It's the unfamiliar. The unfamiliar is seen as a threat by individuals, but it can also be seen as a threat by organizations. But other than that, I think it makes sense if you consider that there have been losses. You try to grow too fast. Owners learn that you got to take it easy. Obviously, it costs money to grow, so that's a factor. There's risks that we don't know about and that we do know about. And then there's the threat of a black swan event or a crisis, the potential for a crisis. And these things, as they should, keep us in our comfort zone. This is why I use the books Good to Great, Great by Choice, and Multipliers. So obviously Good to Great and Great by Choice are sort of the operational view. How do you set up your organization? Multipliers is leading, and at an individual and interpersonal level, I use 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Now, there are many, many other books that feed that. But if my client is only going to read 2 or 3 books, it's going to be one of those, and it'll be depending on what their biggest opportunity is. And then you can always add the other ones in as you go. The other thing I'll say about dynamic leadership is that it's not something that's just being created. Dynamic leadership has been around for a long time, but there's not a lot of structure like you would have with command and control or with servant leadership with a lot of rules, so to speak. Dynamic leadership is about leading the way people want to be led. It's about tapping into intrinsic motivation, because intrinsic motivation will far outperform extrinsic motivation. But each person is different, so it's difficult for a university to come up with a statement, a set of statements that says this is how you're supposed to lead people. However, when you look at self-determination theory and its pillars of autonomy, competence, and relatedness, that's where it all comes together. And if I recall, the book on self-determination theory is over 900 pages. Imagine trying to turn that into a leadership methodology. So this is why we come up from the bottom up by understanding human needs and then understanding the role of the leader with respect to that. We've got the comfort zone, and we know that we have these challenges to get across, and this becomes a barrier. And whenever we get in here, stress gets higher. You have to get more reviews. We've all been there before. Some things you make a decision and it just rolls right along. Other times you make a decision and you have to get all these approvals, and the board is meeting and it's got to go before the board, and et cetera, et cetera. What we want to do, though, is how we probably thought about it when we started the business in the first place. Remember, I'm talking to small business owners, and we didn't expect to just go along with the herd. We didn't expect everybody to just be operating like that, and there's a slight upward bias towards these lines. We actually thought we would do something like this. But stuff happens, and anybody who's in business understands that there's always something that happens. There are many, many things that come up. For example, a organization with less than $1 million is very different than an organization doing more than $1 million in revenue. An organization doing $1 million in revenue is much different than an organization doing 20 or 30 million dollars in revenue. And you know, you're running from 8 to 10 employees on the $1 million, which can be run by one person, right? Span of control. And now you're at 30, 40, 50 employees. You have a leadership team. And each one of these levels of complexity requires a different approach from the leader. And as humans, we're creatures of habit. We like to do what worked in the past. And what worked in the past is not what you need when you cross that threshold of $1 million to 1.5 million in revenue. What worked in the past could be the exact opposite what you need. So when we start thinking about these risks and potential for crisis and the losses that we've had, and you can just keep listing this out, what we want to do is recognize that some of these may only have applied when we were under $1 million in revenue. Although there are going to be new ones that show up when we get to $20 million in revenue. So back to this. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we're talking about. Taking small businesses. Now let's say this is the projection. We don't know that this is where you are. You're back here. We don't know what your actual results are going to be. We hope they're this. We hope we have this projection. But when you look around and you look at how many businesses fail within 5 years, and you look how many businesses struggle, you recognize that, you know what? Maybe I better have a plan. So what we're going to do is talk about what it looks like not to do this and go along with the crowd, but to literally do this and break out. Now, this breaking out has a few things. And by the way, everybody doesn't have the luxury of being brand new in business, right? Some people are looking down through this tunnel, and they're wondering if the light at the end is a train that's coming or really the end of the tunnel. They have to figure out, in fact, there's probably more people who have to figure out how to break out than people who are starting out, because there are, obviously so many businesses. Now, one of the things I want to show on this slide is, so when we decide to make that shift, and let's say, we've read the books, we've gone to the seminars, we've hired the consultants, and we're doing the things. I talk about culture. Culture is a big factor. But what's going to happen first is that your lows will get higher. Now, what's nice about business is that you can have exponential results. Everything is not linear. You can have exponential results. But in the beginning, you may feel like it's a whole lot of work to get a little bit of nothing. But you have to stay with it. And eventually, you will be able to break out. The challenge comes because when you break out, you're instantly faced with new problems. And you can't have a breakthrough without a break from the past. And so as we're heading for this breakthrough, we will probably experience some more of this. Now, some people are fortunate and they can blast right through, and especially if they're riding the wave of a huge major shift and they caught it right. But for every one of the companies who's doing that, there's dozens of others who didn't make it. Look at the dot-com bubble, 1999, 2000, 2001. That period of time, there were so many companies coming online for the internet, and how many actually made it to, using Jim Collins' work, good to great, let alone great by choice. Same thing is going on in a way with artificial intelligence. So many companies are jumping in on that bandwagon because it makes sense. But there's only going to be a few who really make a difference once the smoke clears. And so that's all the noise that happens up here. And this is going to be a lot of noise as you go through. But eventually you break through. And that's what we want to talk about. We want to talk about when you break through, and we want to stay there. We don't want to come back. So this part here is Jim Collins' good to great. You're good and you're doing well, and then we become great. And in Jim Collins' work, it was 15 years. So you break out and you get results that are a certain level above your peer group, what do you call the comparison companies, and you held that trend for 15 years. So this is not a flash in the pan, Johnny come lately thing. This is, we made the shift and we're going. And he talked about level 5 leadership, and there are other different factors that came into play. The hedgehog concept, keeping it simple. The flywheel concept, that every day you come in and you give that flywheel a turn. So, and these are some of the factors that were present in the companies that made that leap from good to great. And that's to me is the playbook for you. We talk about teams. Teams have a playbook. You may not have a playbook because you're making this up as you go, but why argue with great results when you have that much behind a work like Good to Great? And because he used public companies, he was able to gather information, reams and reams of information. And then what's nice about the follow-on book, Great by Choice, is some of those great Good to Great companies did not survive the economic crisis 2006, 7, 8. And then Great by Choice took a look at the companies that didn't succumb. So there are companies that failed during that crisis that were in the Good to Great companies. So only some of them made it. And now he's looking at those. And that's where he talks about, we're going to use the concept of bullets, then cannons. And this is like with, they use it in artillery and mortars, and there's a forward observer looking at the target, and they adjust what they think the arc of the angle of the mortar or the artillery barrel should be, and they shoot. And it's going to land. It's either going to land right or left or long or short in some combination. The forward observer will give instructions of how long it was and what to adjust. Meanwhile, they're back there adjusting the angle, and they shoot again. So it's like what you're looking for is long, a little bit less short, a little bit less long, a lot less short, and then fire for effect. And it's while he doesn't talk about it exactly that way, it's the same concept. Using two ships in an ocean in battle, and rather than shoot cannons right off the bat, you first shoot bullets to get your angles right, and then you start shooting the cannonballs. The cannonballs are more expensive, they're heavier, they take more gunpowder, etc. You get the idea. So I have this example. Clock face is, you got 12, we have 9, we have 6. Direction of travel is 12. We have 11 and 10 and 1 and 2. From 11 to 1 is a cone of about 30 degrees. If you imagine riding a bicycle, and this is your direction of travel, you see something in the road, you can swerve 15 degrees without losing any momentum. If you have to make a turn that's all the way over here to 10, you're going to have to give up some momentum. You can gain it back, but you've lost time. If your change is so significant that it's way over here, that's going to require you to lose a lot of momentum. again, even driving a car, you get this idea that to make a 90-degree turn, you're going to have to slow down. If you're doing 70, you'll have to slow down to more like 10 miles per hour, give up all that speed, and then you've got to build it up again. But if this was your direction of travel, not only do you have to deal with that, you've got to figure out how to get back over here. Whereas if you think in terms of pivoting, then you're only going 15 degrees off course, and your range of your pivot is 30 degrees. And you'll use KPIs and you'll use other factors to let you know where those limits are coming up. And imagine a plane going across the country or across the pond. It's going to be off course 90% of the time. Now, it's not quite making 15 degrees pivots. It might be making 5 degrees pivots. So it's a lot tighter. But they're making those pivots constantly so that they don't have to make big pivots. And how can you even do any of this if you don't first have a vision? Bringing it back to the topic of today is the vision. Now, we have the vision, and we broke out the good to great breakout. We used the bullets, then cannons. We used the flywheel. We used the hedgehog to keep it simple. We use the 20-mile march concept, which is similar to the flywheel of doing high moderate amount of work and not trying to hit for the fences every time. We're doing base hits, and then that's going to take us towards the vision. But if you think about it in terms of employees, every time you add another 8 to 15 employees, you're adding complexity, because using a standard span of control, you probably added 2 leaders. And each time you add more leaders, your leadership team is changing, the dynamics change. On this journey up here, we're going to need some operational and some pivots. We're going to find that in order to maintain this trajectory, we're going to have to make some changes in the organization. This is a pivot. This is a project. This is project work. And then we're going to run that out operationally, and it's going to drop down a little bit. We may lose a little bit, and then we have to pivot. We maybe go outside of that line a little bit, and that gets our KPIs kicking off and telling us, hey, you got to switch up, change gears, different opportunities. This is why you need the operational excellence. We don't want to lose too much. And there's entropy we're fighting against. That's why I have it going down. There's always entropy that we're fighting against. And there's internal pressures, external pressures. But we're going to keep running these pivots followed by operational excellence. Now, how do we know when we're coming to these lines? That's where you consultants is your KPIs. You're going to look at some historicals, but you should also look at other factors. As Alex Chaffrin does some good work around this topic. Join mastermind groups. Ideally, a mastermind that has organizations who are a little bit lower than you, which you can help, but organizations that are a little bit larger than you that can help you. And what we're dealing with is we have to avoid the shiny things, right? You go chasing shiny things, we know where that can land. And we've got to watch out chasing just any random opportunities. And this is easier to do when you have a vision, because either it's aligned with your vision or it's not. Now, the other thing we have to worry about is VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And we have threats every day. And we have people, challenges. We have an organization. There's going to be noise on both sides. There's noise over here. There's noise over here. And these things all make it very difficult to stay the course. And this is why you need principles, best practices, and that's why I go with dynamic leadership. That's why I use the guidelines from good to great and great by choice, because it helps us to do that. But to the topic we're talking about is vision. So I don't want to lose sight of that. This is why the vision is so important. And even as a small business owner, getting investors coming in to help you out, you're going to end up having to add a board. They're going to, at some point, you will have to have a board. And in the early days, the board might be to help you grow. But once your value gets to be a certain amount, that focus is going to shift to governance. I would argue the same way that, yes, you need a balance sheet, income statement, cash flow statement, etc. You need a CPA. But I would argue that as a small business owner, you should also be looking at getting managerial accounting as well, because the accountant is there to provide the framework to pay taxes. they're not necessarily designed to help you grow your business profitably. That's where the managerial accounting can. So similar to the way I talk about managerial accounting vis-a-vis accounting, I also talk about a board the same way. If you wait until you're told to have a board for governance, I think you've missed a lot of opportunities. I think small business owners, and it may not seem like a board, it may not function like a board if you look from the outside in, but you're using them as mentors. You're using them as guides. Some people do it with, like I said, communities and masterminds. But you want people who can help you see around corners. You want people to challenge you. Remember, what worked from 0 to $1 million or 2 million is not going to work, for the most part, from 2 million to 4 million in revenue, and on and on and on. So you need somebody to see around the corners. And it doesn't always take a mentor, somebody who's done it before. It takes somebody who's a student of the game and can ask you the right questions and can hear when you are talking out of your past associations or when you're talking out of your fears and worries versus your vision. They can also challenge you as to, are you really doing that for your vision, or is this something that's convenient? Hearing those decisions of convenience pop up. All of that gets into play, but it's hard to do it if you don't first have a vision. Another reason why we need a vision is because you are going to need a leadership team. And my opinion is that the majority of small business owners wait too long to put a leadership team in place. For obvious reasons, it costs money, and they're going to stretch their span of control. Not only that, most small business owners are successful because the buck stops with them. They become the one who makes the decisions, and they can become the bottleneck. So there's sort of like a double whammy there. It's going to cost them more money, and they're going to have to give up some of their autonomy, if you will. So I think we put off putting the leadership team into place for too long. Not only that, if you think about a span of control being 6 to 10 people, ideally, that number still works. I mean, it's in the military command and control. There are organizations that get away with spans up to 50. They use artificial intelligence, they're using technology, etc. But in terms of leading, in terms of making a difference as a leader, I would say keep gravitating towards that 8 range. When I talk about spans like this, I'm talking about the leadership team. And so with that leadership team, if you wait until you have 10 or 12 people before you add a manager to help you with leading the organization, something's got to give, right? So if a span of control is 8, you probably need 3 of those units just to manage the organization. So maybe the leaders, I can't tell you what the exact answer is,